Dust never really settled on Halden's reach. It hung in the air of every tunnel, coated every machine, and worked its way into the lungs of everyone who lived there. The colony sat on a broken chunk of rock at the far edge of an asteroid belt, so far from anything that the sun looked like nothing more than a bright, cold star. People here did not talk about home. Home was a thing they had stopped waiting for. Owen wiped the grime from his hands and climbed the ladder to the signal room. He was young, barely 20, with a mind that never sat still. While the other workers slept off their long shifts in the mines, he spent his nights here, listening. The signal room was little more than a metal box with a chair, a cracked screen, and rows of old receivers that hummed like tired insects. But to Owen, it was a window to the whole galaxy. He put on the worn headset and began his slow scan across the deep channels. Most nights he heard nothing but static, the endless hiss of empty space. Sometimes he caught a stray voice, a merchant far away, a piece of music from a world he would never see. He wrote everything down in a small notebook, dates and frequencies, and the strange sounds of a galaxy that had no idea Halden's reach existed. The colony held about 4,000 people, miners mostly. Along with their families, a few farmers who grew pale vegetables under artificial lamps, and a handful of engineers who kept the air flowing and the water clean. They were tough people, used to hardship, used to going without. They had to be. Nothing came easy this far out. The one who held them all together was Governor Reyes. She was not a tall woman and she was not loud, but when she spoke, people listened. She had led the colony through 3 bad harvests, 2 mine collapses, and 1 long winter when the heating failed and everyone had slept in the same crowded hall to stay warm. She never promised things would get better. She only promised she would not leave anyone behind. That was enough. Somewhere far beyond the belt, the great powers of the galaxy went about their business. The largest of them was an ancient group of species who called themselves the Coalition of the 9 Suns. They had ruled the stars for longer than humans had known how to write. They had grand cities on 1,000 worlds, fleets that filled the sky, and a deep belief that they understood everything worth understanding. To the Coalition, humans were nothing. A young species, barely off their own world, scattered thin across a few colonies with no power and no navy worth the name. The Coalition had looked at humanity once, decided they were harmless and unimportant, and then looked away. In their records, Earth was marked as a minor world, too far and too weak to ever matter. They did not think about humans at all. Why would they? Owen did not know any of this. He only knew that the supply ships had stopped coming. It had been over 2 years now. In the beginning, the colonists had watched the sky every week, waiting for the flash of an arriving ship, the promise of new tools, fresh food, letters from family on other worlds. The ships came less and less. Then they came not at all. No message explained it. No warning was sent. One day the sky simply stopped giving them anything. At first there was fear, then anger, then slowly something worse than both. There was acceptance. The people of Halden's Reach came to believe that Earth had forgotten them, that somewhere far away someone had crossed their little colony off a list and moved on. It was easier, in a way, to believe they had been forgotten than to keep hopping and be let down each time the sky stayed empty. Reyes never said it out loud, but Owen had seen it in her face too. The waiting had gone out of her. Now she only planned for the colony to survive on its own, growing what food it could, stretching every part and every drop of water as far as it would go. She had stopped looking up. But Owen kept listening, not because he expected a rescue. He was not a foolish boy who believed in stories. He listened because the silence bothered him. A galaxy this large should be loud. It should be full of voices, ships, signals crossing in every direction. Yet lately, the channels near the belt had gone strangely quiet, quieter than the normal empty hiss. It was as if something out there had made the other voices stop. He could not explain the feeling, but it sat in his chest like a stone. Night after night he searched the frequencies, trying to catch whatever it was that made his skin crawl. He told himself it was nothing, old machines making him nervous, too many long shifts with too little sleep. On this night he sat back in the cracked chair and looked at the little screen. Outside, through the small round window, the asteroid belt drifted in slow silence, rocks tumbling in the dark the way they had for millions of years. The colony's few lights glowed weakly against the black. Everything was as it always was. Quiet, forgotten, alone. Owen closed his notebook. He was tired and he almost switched everything off and went to bed. But something made him leave one receiver running, the way he always did, just in case. He did not know why he bothered. No one ever called Halden's reach. He did not know it yet, but far out in the dark, past the tumbling rocks and the empty channels, something was already moving toward them. Something that did not come to trade or to help or to bring letters from home. Owen turned off the light and went to sleep, believing, like everyone else, that they were alone. The warning came in the middle of a card game. Down in the common hall, a dozen miners sat around a battered table, laughing and arguing over a hand of cards when the lights flickered and the whole room went quiet. Everyone looked up. Power flickers were normal on Halden's reach, but this one felt different. It came with a low sound, a deep vibration that ran through the floor and into their bones. The cards lay forgotten. Nobody spoke. Up in the signal room, Owen was already awake and staring at his screen, his heart pounding. The sound that had woken him was not from the colony. It had come through his receiver, loud enough to make him tear the headset from his ears. Now he pressed it back on with shaking hands and listened. It was a transmission, not human, not coalition. It was cold and clipped, a voice that clicked and hissed in a language his old machine could barely translate. The words came through in broken pieces, but enough of them made sense to turn his blood to ice. Harvest. Sweep the sector. No survivors of value. Clear the rock. The rock, they meant Halden's reach. Owen scrambled through his notebook, checking the signal's origin, plotting it against the star charts he had copied over the years. The source was moving, and it was moving toward the belt. Whatever it was big, and it was not alone. He counted the separate signals inside the transmission the way a hunter counts eyes in the dark. There were many of them, a fleet. He ran. He did not stop running until he reached the governor's quarters, banging on the metal door with both fists. Reyes opened it, half asleep, and one look at his face was enough. She had known this boy since he was a child. She had never seen him afraid like this. Within the hour, the colony's leaders gathered in the small control room. Owen played the transmission for them, and the translated words hung in the air like a death sentence. Reyes listened twice, her face still, her hands flat on the table. Then she asked the question everyone was thinking. Who were they? It was one of the old miners who answered, a woman named Holloway who had traveled the belt for 40 years before settling here. She had heard the stories from traders long ago. She called them the Draven. The name meant little to Owen, but the way Holloway said it made the room go cold. The Draven hegemony, she said, was an empire that did not conquer worlds the way others did. They did not want to rule people. They wanted to use them. They stripped worlds of everything useful, minerals, water, and living beings alike, and they took the survivors away in chains to work until they died. They feared nothing, not even the coalition. Reyes closed her eyes for a moment. Then she opened them and began to give orders. The colony had no weapons worth the name. A few mining charges. Some old cutting lasers meant for rock, not for war. Nothing that could touch a fleet. But Reyes was not a woman who gave up, and she was not about to start now. She sent the engineers to fortify the shelters deep in the mines, where the children and the old could hide. She sent the miners to rig every charge and trap they could build. And she sent Owen back to the signal room to do the one thing that might still save them all. Call for help. Owen sent the distress call toward coalition space, aiming it at the nearest of their border stations. He poured everything into it, the transmission he had recorded, the colony's location, the count of enemy ships, and a simple, desperate plea. 4,000 people. Please come. The wait was the worst part. Hours passed. The colony held its breath. Then, at last, an answer came back through the receiver, and Owen's hope died as he heard it. The Coalition's reply was calm and polite, which somehow made it crueler. Humans, the message said, were not members of the Coalition. Halden's reach lay outside protected territory. The matter was regrettable, but it was not the Coalition's concern. No aid would be sent. The message ended, and the channel closed with a soft click, like a door being gently shut. Far away on a clean and quiet station, a Coalition official named Salith read the same report and set it aside without much thought. She was a high counselor, ancient and important, and to her the loss of a human mining colony was a small and distant thing, hardly worth an entry in her log. She recorded a single line for the records. "The humans of Halden's Reach will be lost," she wrote, "and no one will come for them." She believed it completely. It never crossed her mind that she might be wrong. Back on the rock, the colonists did not fall apart. Owen had feared they would, but Rays would not allow it. She walked through every tunnel, spoke to every group, looked every frightened person in the eye. She did not lie to them. She told them the truth, that a hard thing was coming and that they would face it together the way they had faced everything else. Somehow her steadiness spread. People wept, but they also worked. They loaded supplies into the shelters. They carried the children down into the deep, safe dark. Owen stayed at his post. He could see the first of the Draven ships now, small points of light at the edge of the system, growing slowly brighter. They were in no hurry. To them this was not a battle. It was a harvest. The rock was not going anywhere, and the creatures on it could not run. As he watched them come, Owen made a choice. He did not tell anyone. He simply kept one channel open and pointed it out into the deep black, toward the empty stars where Earth should have been, and he began to send one last message. Not to the Coalition this time. To his own kind. To whoever, if anyone, was still out there and might still care. He did not expect an answer. No one ever answered Halden's Reach. But he sent it anyway, over and over into the silence. A single faint signal, weak and half broken, slipped across the dark and arrived at a place no map showed. The place had no name that anyone used out loud. It was a listening post, hidden inside a dead moon on the far side of an empty system, built into the rock and shielded so well that even the ships passing nearby never knew it was there. Inside, banks of machines watched the whole region of space, catching every whisper that crossed it. And on this shift, the one watching was a young officer named Dana. Dana had been on duty for 6 hours and had heard nothing but the usual noise. Then the weak signal came in, so faint that the machines almost tossed it away as junk. Something made her stop and pull it back. She cleaned it up, ran it through the filters, and listened. It was a voice. A human voice, tired and scared, repeating the same message over and over into the black. 4,000 people, please come. Most would have marked it and passed it up the chain to be dealt with later if at all. Dana did not. She traced the signal to its source, saw the name Halden's Reach, and felt something tighten in her chest. She checked the enemy count buried in the message. She checked how long the signal had been traveling to reach her. Then she was up out of her chair and moving fast because she understood something the sender did not. The message was old. Whatever was happening at Halden's Reach had already begun. To understand what happened next, you have to understand what humanity had become, and why no one in the galaxy knew it. 2 years earlier, humans had been exactly what the Coalition believed them to be, young, scattered, and weak. But 2 years earlier, something had happened that no history book outside of Earth recorded. A hostile species, one even the Coalition feared, had struck at humanity without warning and nearly wiped them out. Earth had survived, barely, at a terrible cost. And in the ashes of that near death, humanity had learned a lesson it would never forget. The lesson was simple and hard. The galaxy did not respect the weak. It did not protect the small. It did not answer the cries of those who could not defend themselves. Begging for a seat at the table had gotten humanity nothing but a target on its back, so humanity stopped begging. Instead, they went quiet. They pulled back from the busy trade lanes. They let the galaxy believe they were licking their wounds, fatting, becoming even less important than before. And behind that silence, Hidden in dead systems and shielded moons and deep dark places the Coalition never bothered to watch, humanity began to build. They built shipyards, they built engines, they built weapons. They took everything they had learned from the species that nearly destroyed them and they made it their own, and then they made it better. They did not build to conquer. They built so that never again would a human colony send a cry for help and hear only silence in return. They built a fleet, and they told no one. Dana carried the distress call up the chain herself, refusing to hand it to anyone else, until she stood in front of the one person who could do something about it. Fleet Admiral Cole. Cole was an old man, though he did not move like one. His hair had gone gray and his face was lined and weathered, but his eyes were sharp and still. He had lived through the near end of humanity. He had buried friends and worlds. He had spent the 2 years of silence building the fleet and waiting, though he never said out loud what he was waiting for. Dana thought, watching him read the message, that maybe he had been waiting for exactly this. He read it once. He did not ask questions about whether Halden's reach was worth saving, or whether it was too far, or whether it was really the fleet's problem. Those were Coalition questions. They were not his. He set the message down and looked at Dana, and his voice was quiet and certain. "No human colony gets left behind," he said. "Not while I am alive to stop it." Then he gave the order. It moved out through the hidden network of shipyards like fire through dry grass. In dead systems across the dark, engines that had waited 2 long years began to wake. Great doors ground open in the rock. Lights that had slept came on, row after row, and the low hum of power spread until whole hidden bases shook with it. Crews ran to their posts. Ships that had been built and tested and never flown in anger drank in power and came alive. Dana was given a place at Cole's side, for she was the one who had found the call and refused to let it die, and Cole believed in rewarding that. She stood on the deck of the flagship and watched through the great windows as the fleet gathered. She had known the ships existed. She had helped watch over the systems that hid them. But knowing a thing and seeing it are not the same. When the fleet formed up in the dark, ship after ship after ship, more than she could count, more than she had imagined, her breath caught in her throat. The galaxy did not know these ships existed. The Coalition, with all its ancient wisdom, had no idea. The Draven, closing in on a helpless little colony they thought no one cared about, had no idea. Only humanity knew, and humanity had kept the secret well. Cole gave the final word, and the fleet began to move. Not slowly, not carefully, but fast, with the full weight of 2 years of quiet fury behind it. In the dark of a hidden system, the great ships turned as one, pointed themselves toward a small rock at the edge of an asteroid belt, and vanished into faster-than-light travel, tearing across the galaxy toward Halden's reach. Owen's message had not been lost. It had not fallen into silence. It had been heard and answered, and the answer was already coming, faster than the Draven could ever have believed possible. They just had to get there in time. The Draven came down on Halden's reach the way. A storm comes down on a field. Their ships filled the near sky now, dark shapes with hard edges, blotting out the tumbling rocks of the belt. From the surface, the colonists could see them clearly, hanging above like a ceiling of iron. There was no more waiting, no more wondering. The harvest had begun. In the deep tunnels, the children were hidden and quiet. The old and the sick were with them. Packed into the safest shelters the miners could build. Above them, in the tunnels closer to the surface, the fighters of Halden's reach waited with their pitiful weapons, cutting lasers and mining charges and stubborn hearts. They knew what was coming. Rays had not hidden it from them. They stayed anyway. Owen was still in the signal room. He should have gone to the shelters, but he could not make himself leave the receiver. His last message was still going out, still crying into the black, and some foolish, stubborn part of him could not stop sending it. Rays had come by once and told him to go below. He had looked at her, and she had seen the same stubbornness in him that lived in her, and she had let him stay. She only touched his shoulder once and told him to be brave. Then she went to be with her people. The Draven's lead warlord was a creature named Carr. He stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked down at the little colony with something close to boredom. He had done this 100 times. Find a weak world, strip it bare, take the strong ones for labor, and leave the rest as a lesson to anyone foolish enough to be small. The humans on this rock did not even have a fleet. It was hardly worth the fuel to get here. Carr gave the order to begin the assault, already thinking about the next target after this one. His weapons crews took aim. On the surface, the colonists saw the enemy ships shift, saw the gun ports open, and knew the end had come. Ray stood in the mouth of a tunnel, looking up, and did not look away. If this was the end, she would meet it with her eyes open. And then the stars began to go out. It started at the far edge of the sky, one point of light winking out, then another, then a dozen, then too many to count. It was as if a great black hand was reaching across the heavens and covering the stars one by one. The colonists stared up in confusion and fear. Even Carr, on his bridge, paused. His crew turned from their targets and looked at their scanners, and the sounds they made were sounds of alarm. The stars were not dying, they were being blocked. Ship after ship was dropping out of faster-than-light travel above Halden's reach, and there were so many of them that they blotted out the light of the whole sky behind them. Not a handful, not a squadron, a fleet beyond anything the belt had ever seen, so vast that it turned the heavens dark. Earth's fleet had arrived, and it darkened the stars. On the bridge of the Draven flagship, Carr stared at his scanners in disbelief. The numbers made no sense to him. This was a human colony, a nothing world, a forgotten rock. Humans had no fleet. Everyone knew this. The coalition itself had marked them as weak and powerless. This had to be a trick, some clever illusion, or perhaps the coalition breaking its own word and coming to defend a world it had abandoned. It could not be humans. It simply could not. But it was. Far away, on her clean and quiet station, Counselor Salith was woken from her rest by frantic reports. She rose and went to her instruments and looked at the readings coming from the belt, and for the first time in her long, proud life, she did not understand what she was seeing. The scanners were counting human warships, and they were counting more of them than the entire navy of the coalition of the Nine Suns. A force this size did not exist. It could not exist. Yet there it was, filling her screens, real and enormous and utterly impossible. The line she had written in her log came back to her. No one will come for them. She had been so sure. She had been wrong. On the surface, the colonists did not understand what was happening either, but they understood one thing. Those were human ships. The shapes were familiar, the markings were their own, and after 2 years of silence, after being written off and forgotten, they were not alone anymore. A sound rose from the tunnels of Halden's reach, a sound of weeping and shouting and disbelief, 4,000 voices crying out at once. Ray stood in the tunnel mouth with tears on her face and did not wipe them away. In the signal room, Owen's receiver came alive. A new signal poured in, strong and clear, human close. He tore off his old broken headset and pressed the good one to his ears, hardly daring to believe. The message was short. Halden's reach, this is Earth's fleet. Hold on, we are here. Owen put his head down on the console and shook, and he did not know if he was laughing or crying, and it did not matter. Above the colony, one ship moved to the front of the vast dark fleet. It was the flagship, and on its bridge stood Fleet Admiral Cole, looking down at the Draven ships that had come to harvest his people. He did not open fire. Not yet. Instead, he opened a single broadcast, aimed straight at Carr's fleet, and his voice went out calm and cold and clear for all of them to hear. He gave the Draven one chance. Withdraw from this system. Release every captive you have taken from this world and every other. Do it now and you may leave alive. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply told them how it was going to be and let the vast fleet behind him speak for itself. On his bridge, Warlord Carr listened to the words of a species he had been taught to see as prey, telling him, ordering him to turn and run. His pride rose up hot and black in his chest. He was a warlord of the Draven hegemony. He did not retreat before lesser creatures. He would not be commanded by cattle. Carr gave the order to open fire, and the sky above Halden's reach turned to fire and light. The first Draven shot never reached the human fleet. It burned out against a wall of defensive fire so fast and so precise that Carr's weapons crews barely saw it happen. One moment their volley was streaking across the black, and the next it was gone, torn apart in mid-flight. Then the human fleet answered, and the true nature of the battle became clear at once. This was not going to be a fight between equals. This was going to be a reckoning. Human ships moved through the dark with a speed and a purpose that the Draven could not match. They did not fight the way Carr expected. They did not line up in neat rows and trade blows. They struck from angles no calculating mind would choose, split apart and came back together, drew the enemy in and then closed around them like a fist. Every move looked reckless, and every move worked. Behind each one lay 2 years of hard training and a species that had learned to fight while staring death in the face. Carr shouted orders on his bridge, trying to hold his fleet together, but his ships were being pulled apart faster than he could react. The humans were inside his formation now, and he could not push them out. He had come here to harvest cattle. He had walked into a storm. Down on the surface, the fight was not only in the sky. Owen was back at his post, but he was no longer just listening. The fleet had reached out to him, the one human voice already on the rock who knew the ground and the enemy positions, and now he was part of it. He fed them everything, the movements of the Draven landing craft, the places where their fire came from, the paths through the belt that a ship could use to strike unseen. His hands flew across the console, his voice steady now, and above him, human pilots used what he gave them to cut the enemy down. A frightened boy from a forgotten colony had become the eyes of a fleet. Dana worked at Cole's side on the flagship, but her mind was not only on the battle. From the moment the fighting began, she had been thinking about the captives. The Draven did not travel light. Their ships were full of prisoners taken from other worlds, beings of many different species, chained in the dark holds and forgotten. If those ships were destroyed, the captives would die with them. Dana would not allow it. She organized the rescue shuttles, small fast craft that darted through the chaos of the battle to reach crippled Draven ships and pull the prisoners out before the end. It was dangerous work, flying into the heart of a war to save strangers, and the humans did it without hesitation. That was the thing the Draven could not understand. The humans fought with a ferocity that shook even hardened warlords, and yet in the middle of that fury they spent lives and risked to save beings they had never met. Carr's crews had never seen an enemy do such a thing. To them, war was harvest, and the weak were only cargo. They had no word for what the humans were doing. The battle turned quickly. Carr's fleet, so proud and so certain when it arrived, began to break apart. Ships that had crossed the galaxy to enslave a helpless world were now scattered wrecks drifting in the dark. The warlord watched his power crumble around him and felt something he had not felt in a very long time: fear. He gave the order to flee. The Draven flagship turned and ran, along with what was left of the fleet, racing for the edge of the system where they could jump away and escape. But Cole had seen it coming. He had placed his ships well, and now they closed the door. The human fleet spread out across the escape routes and cut off the retreat until Cuz's ships had nowhere left to run. The warlord was trapped, surrounded, his fleet in ruins, staring at a wall of human ships on every side. And then the fire stopped. Cole did not give the order to finish them. He could have. Every gun in his fleet was ready, and no one would have questioned it. The Draven had come to enslave and murder, and mercy was not what they deserved. But Cole was thinking about more than this one battle. He was thinking about the whole galaxy and the story that would be told about this day. He opened the broadcast again, his voice as calm as it had been at the start. He offered the Draven the same mercy he had offered before the first shot was fired. Surrender. Release your captives. Lay down your weapons and you will live. He gave them the choice, even now, even after Ka had thrown that same mercy back in his face. On his broken bridge, surrounded and beaten, Warlord Ka understood at last what he had failed to understand from the start. He had judged the humans by what the galaxy said of them, and the galaxy had been wrong. These were not cattle. They had simply been quiet. He gave the order to surrender. The captives came free. Dunna's shuttles and the fleet's crews opened the dark holds of the Draven ships and brought the prisoners into the light, beings of a dozen kinds who had lived in chains and thought they would die in them. They came out blinking and afraid, and then they saw the humans who had come for them, and they saw that these strangers had crossed the galaxy and fought a war and now were freeing them for no reason, except that it was the right thing to do. In the eyes of those freed beings was something they had never felt toward the great powers of the galaxy. The coalition had never come for them. Humans had. Word of the battle did not stay quiet for long. It spread across the star systems faster than any ship could fly, carried in 1,000 frantic messages. The species that the great powers had dismissed, the young and scattered humans marked as weak and powerless, had appeared out of nowhere with a fleet that darkened the stars, crushed a Draven wafflet, and freed its captives. Overnight, the whole galaxy had to change how it thought about Earth. Above Halden's reach, the fighting was over. The sky, so full of fire a short while before, grew quiet. The wrecks of the Draven fleet drifted in the dark, and around them the human ships held their steady formation, vast and calm, watching over the little rock they had come so far to save. On the surface, the colonists came up out of their tunnels into the open, looking up at the fleet that filled their sky. And Owen, stepping out of the signal room at last, stood among his people and looked up with them. And for the first time in 2 years, Halden's reach did not feel forgotten. The first human boots to touch Halden's reach in over 2 years came down softly on the dusty ground of the landing field. The whole colony had come out to see it. 4,000 people, miners and farmers and engineers and children who had been hidden in the deep dark only hours before, stood in a great crowd and watched the shuttle settle and its ramp lower. Nobody spoke. After so long believing they had been forgotten, they hardly knew what to do with the sight of their own kind walking toward them across the field. Fleet Admiral Cole was the first down the ramp. He looked older in person than he did on the broadcasts, gray and weathered, but he walked straight and steady, and his eyes moved over the crowd with a gentleness that surprised them. Governor Ruz stepped forward to meet him. The two leaders stood facing each other, the old admiral and the steady governor, and for a moment neither found the right words. It was Ruz who spoke first. She told him simply that they had believed no one was coming, that they had crossed themselves off the list because it hurt less than hopping. Cole listened, and when she was done, he shook his head slowly. He told her that Earth had gone silent to build the strength to protect its own, and that the silence had been a mistake if it made even one colony feel abandoned. Then he said the thing that Ruz would remember for the rest of her life. Humanity does not forget its own, he told her. It never did. We were only getting ready. Ruz did not cry easily. She cried then, and she was not ashamed of it. Among the crowd, Cole found Owen. He knew the boy's name already because Dunna had made sure of it. This was the one, she had told the admiral, whose signal had reached the listening post. The one who had kept a channel open and sent his message into the black when every reason said to give up. If that message had never been sent, the fleet would never have come, and Halden's reach would be a stripped and empty rock. Cole stood before the young technician, this tired boy with grime still under his fingernails, and he did something no one expected. He saluted him. Owen, red-faced and stunned, did not know what to do, and the crowd around him laughed and wept and cheered all at once. In the days that followed, the galaxy came to Halden's reach. The coalition of the 9 suns, so proud and so certain, could no longer pretend that humanity did not matter. Counselor Suleth herself made the journey, the same counselor who had written in her log that no one would come. She stood before Cole and Ruz on the very rock she had been so willing to write off, and she made a formal offer on behalf of the coalition. Humanity, she said, was invited to take a seat among the great powers of the galaxy as a full and equal member. It was an offer that, 2 years before, would have been the answer to every human dream. Cole considered it carefully. Then he gave his answer, and it was not the answer Suluth expected. Humanity would take its place among the powers of the galaxy, he told her, but not as a species grateful to be let in. Not as the small ones finally allowed to sit at the edge of the table. Humanity would stand as an equal on its own terms because it had earned that place with its own strength, and because when the call for help had gone out, it was humanity that had answered while the coalition looked away. Suluth heard the truth in his words, and though it stung her ancient pride, she bowed her head and accepted it. She had learned, too late but not too late to change, that she had judged humanity wrongly. But the greatest change did not come from the coalition. It came from the small and unprotected worlds, the scattered colonies and forgotten peoples who lived at the edges of the galaxy the way Halden's reach did. They had heard the story now, all of it. They had heard how the great powers had turned their backs, and how the humans had come. The freed captives carried the tale to their own worlds, and it spread from there, until across the dark there were countless small voices all saying the same thing. If we are ever in danger, it is not the coalition we will call. It is the humans. They are the ones who come. And so, without meaning to seek it, humanity found itself become something new. Not a species begging for protection, but a species that others looked to for it. The very thing the galaxy had believed impossible. For Halden's reach, life slowly grew brighter. Supply ships came again, real ones this time, bringing food and tools and letters from far away. The mines still ran and the dust still hung in the tunnels, but the people worked with lighter hearts because they knew now, deep down where the old fear had lived, that they were not alone and never would be again. Ruz stayed on as governor, steadier than ever. Owen was offered a place in the fleet, and though he thought about it long and hard, he chose for now to stay with his people, on the rock that was his home, listening to the stars that no longer felt so empty. On the night the last of the fleet prepared to move on, Owen climbed once more to his signal room and sat in the cracked old chair. Through the small round window, he could see the great ships still holding their formation above the colony, keeping watch, and beyond them the belt tumbling in its slow ancient dance, and beyond that the stars, bright and clear and full again. He put on his headset out of old habit and scanned the deep channels, the way he had done on so many lonely nights. This time the silence did not frighten him. This time he knew that if a cry for help ever crossed that darkness, someone would be listening and someone would come. The galaxy had believed no one was coming. It had been wrong. And far out at the edge of an asteroid belt, on a small forgotten rock beneath a fleet that had darkened the stars to save it, a young man smiled in the quiet and understood a simple truth that his people had paid dearly to learn. Humanity always comes.